Hey everybody, this is John from Legends Tabletop Podcast. This is episode 11. I don't have Vince with me tonight. He's feeling a little bit under the weather, but we do have, for the first time ever, Jesse from the Dragon Fisters Podcast present with us. Looks like he's got maybe a magic hat there with him. Is that number 9?
Good eye.
Yeah. And the reason that we're on here tonight, we have Mr. Ken Hite. How you doing, Ken?
Pretty great.
That's good. So today is today the official release for the Dracula Dossier for everybody who missed the Kickstarter?
This the official release. It's in stores on Halloween, so that
nice.
I guess is if you missed the Kickstarter release. This marks the Ken finally got his copies in the mail release, however, which is, as far as I'm concerned, the really important day. So I got my director's handbook. I got my sweet Dracula Unredacted. So I have got. I'm having my own little release party here with Dracula. So yeah, but the books you can pre-order them obviously right now from Pelgrane Press directly through their store. You can go to your store if your store's got the Bits and Mortar program and pre-order it from your store, and then you'll get the PDF immediately and for free. So if you can't wait to start reading, you can pre-order them, and then as soon as you can stand it, they'll be in your hot little hands, just ready to cuddle up with all autumn long.
Sweet. And Halloween, that's a very appropriate release date. I think that's so. Pretty good. So that's cool.
I think Bram Stoker's birthday is real early November, so you can have a party with it if you want.
Oh, see, there you go. It's like a whole convergence of Dracula-ness.
Yeah.
I was doing a little bit of research. We normally don't plan anything, but I usually try to just brush up a little bit. And I was operating under the misconception all this time that Gumshoe was actually created by you, and I found out today that it was actually created by Robin Laws.
No, I mean, I'm happy to take credit for it. Much of my career has been going along after Robin and taking credit for stuff he did. But yeah, in this case, he did design Gumshoe. It originated as the engine for the Esoterrorists role-playing game, and then Simon got the license for Call of Cthulhu to adapt into the Gumshoe system, and he asked me to do it, and I spent 30 or 40 seconds thinking about it so I wouldn't look easy, and I said yes, I would love to do that. And so Trail of Cthulhu sort of is, I guess it sort of became the first real evergreen Gumshoe product that we were able to hang a bunch of other releases on and really go from strength to strength. But yeah, it's Robin's brilliant design, and he sort of did all the intellectual heavy lifting, and then I did Trail of Cthulhu, and then he did Mutant City Blues, and he did another couple of releases and Ashen Stars, and so I followed up with Night's Black Agents, and so we're sort of in a long-form designer-to-designer conversation where he will do something, and I'll say, hey, Robin, did you think of this? And then he's like, not a bad idea, and then he'll do that only better in the next one. So when I did Trail of Cthulhu, he was like, well, that's very fun, Ken. How about a completely revolutionary campaign design for it? And he did the Armitage Files, and I said, I'll see you one better than that. I will rip off your incredibly revolutionary campaign design for the Armitage Files and do it in many, many more words for the Dracula Dossier. So that's sort of our designer relationship, is that he goes and he does something really, really clever, and then I sort of pour my magic fairy dust over it and open it up to other people to play with that are not as in tune with Robin's beautiful mind as I am.
Mm-hmm. A continual upsmanship, that's definitely good for the industry, right?
I think so, yeah. Healthy competition, cross-border.
Yep,
North American battling it out.
Right.
We may have some of that if the Blue Jays continue to do well. Who can say?
Well, the Phillies have been out of it since before the season started, so I don't have anything to say.
The White Sox took themselves out of it with the best pitcher in baseball, and yet here they are watching the Cubs go to the playoffs. So imagine my joy. But there you go.
No, I can't say much. I'm a Red Sox fan, so they got tossed out the window pretty early.
Not your
No.
But you did get Schilling. He was able to win with you guys, so I was kind of happy for that.
Yeah. Right, yeah. And then he crashed a video game company. So.
Well, yeah.
Well, he'd previously, I don't want to say crashed, but let's say not revived a board game company, so it was in the stars, I guess.
Yeah.
Hey, maybe the third time's the charm.
That's true. Some new platform. Kurt Schilling. Hey, Kurt, if you want to start a role-playing game company, here I am. Big fan.
Oh boy. Well, we have a handful of stock questions. So did you play games from a young age? Were you involved in RPGs? Is this something that kind of came on a little bit later in life? Is this kind of in your wheelhouse as far as just being involved with gaming?
Well, I started out as a tabletop wargamer, but that's because when I started out, there weren't any role-playing games.
Mm-hmm.
I was playing Gettysburg back before they had hexes on it when I was 10.
Wow.
And then I started playing D&D, not quite with White Box, but pretty early. They had just released the Monster Manual for AD&D, and that was the first book for AD&D, and I had that from a friend of mine, and I knew nothing about it except here's this incredible book full of awesome monsters, and they have numbers attached to them. And so we managed to have some fun with that, and we put it together with like the old blue book, the basic set, and put it together with that Monster Manual and had some fun with that. And then the rest of AD&D came out, and I was running it and playing it pretty much from the jump as far as that's concerned. So I'm sort of a basic set original AD&D kid. And then from there, my church youth pastor had Traveler, and so I ran Traveler for youth group, and so I was sort of an early adopter, not quite super crazy early. I don't get to have any bragging rights, but it was the late '70s, so that was when it was so popular that people could get political capital out of criticizing it. Mm-hmm. So that was a pretty great time. And then I discovered Call of Cthulhu when that came out in 1981, and that was my one true love, and I ran games of that forever. And I'd still be running it now were it not for one of my players having a severe Lovecraft allergy and therefore not really wanting to subject himself to the unutterable nightmares of the mythos. So we're running Unknown Armies just to get even with him.
Okay. So you do get a chance to play then quite a bit? Do you have a regular group then?
I have a regular group. I've had one. I moved to Chicago in 1988, and I started a regular group pretty soon after that. And this has been my Monday night group. The cast has changed over time, but I've been running at least once a week for years and years and years, because I think that if you're in this business, it can be so easy to just start designing only for what's in your own head, right? You start becoming a bad screenwriter or a frustrated novelist instead of someone who's actually trying to build interactive entertainment, unless you do it. And so, admittedly, if I wrote a game that was only for my players, it would sell 9 copies. But I can at least say, all right, that really only worked for Ken. That worked for no one else but Ken. Put it on the shelf or retool it or do something. And that gives me a sense at least of having to interact with players and get a sense of what they want and what they don't want. And it's a different batch of muscles. I mean, it's a different kind of storytelling to run a game for someone as opposed to read a book or watch a movie or whatever. And that's part of why this hobby and this art form are different and require different sort of skill sets, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly fosters team building, communication, and all the things that they should be encouraging in children. And we had that spate in the '80s where it was the devil's game, and it was such a horrible thing.
It's more popular with kids than knowing the devil plays it. I don't know what does.
Well, that's probably true.
Get a good rip-roaring condemnation going.
Yeah.
The kids back to it. No, the computers are fine. Everyone approves of computers. It's the tabletop stuff that the devil's in.
Yeah. Well, we seem to be in a very large resurgence in not only RPGs but board games and other table games as well, which is pretty nice.
I think it's the Pokemon generation becoming old enough to start buying their own games, right? These are all kids that when they were 4 and 5 they started playing Pokemon, and so they've been sort of marinated in hit points and everything for a decade plus, and levels and all of our crazy terminology. Their whole lives have been gamified, really. So when they get to be 13, 14, it isn't the sort of, oh my gosh, there's a new thing. It's like, well, it's the same thing I've been doing my whole life. It's just got different things going on, different dice or whatever. So I think that there's been, we sort of built this audience, or rather, Wizards of the Coast and Pokemon built this audience, and now we're harvesting some of it, which makes sense.
Yep,
that's a great concept.
Yeah, they certainly have their dirty fingers in everything, Wizards of the Coast.
Well, they were very nice to me when I worked for them, and I'm always happy to let them go out there and establish the entry point to the hobby so that I don't have to. It's very hard to write for people who don't know what you're doing yet. It's much easier for me to write for someone who sort of groks what tabletop role-playing is. Although that said, we're going to be doing a starter set for Trail of Cthulhu in the next little bit, and it'll be fun to sort of try to open it back up to that audience that maybe knows games and they may know board games even, but they don't know exactly the difference between that and a role-playing game, and sort of provide a gentle path inwards from tabletop board games into role-playing.
Mm-hmm. I guess Fantasy Flight's doing that to a greater or lesser extent with the board games that they release. It's really a mixture kind of role play and board game. You know, it takes you 6 hours to play. It's pretty much an entire gaming session.
Yeah, I mean they do blur the line a good bit, and also their Arkham Horror and Eldritch Horror and the Call of Cthulhu Living Card Game, all those sort of, they share art assets and they share a common look, so it's easy to imagine someone going from one to the other, and now of course they're getting back into role-playing again, so who can say?
Right.
So you said that you're going to be creating a starter set for the Trail of Cthulhu. Do you go into a different mindset when you're kind of starting and purposely attempting to pull in new audience members?
Yeah, I think you do. I mean, when I wrote the starter adventure for the old Lord of the Rings game, when we did it for Decipher, it was very much about, this is someone who's seen the movies, and so they know what they want, but they don't know how to get it out of tables and dice and charts. And you try to present things in a, I don't want to say more obvious way, but a more straightforward way.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if you look at the introductory adventure, or the sample adventure rather, in Trail of Cthulhu, it's pretty deep end, right? It's a little bizarre. Well, it's not a little bizarre. It's crazy bizarre, and it's tied very tightly into a grotesque serial killing that's a legitimate historical event. And there's all kinds of reasons that you might not want to say, "Hey, 13-year-old stranger, why don't you know what it is?" And so when we do the starter set, it's going to have to be a more narratively straightforward thing as well as mechanically straightforward. It's going to be, it's a haunted house. Everyone knows haunted houses. You got your whatever, so you walk in, there's problems, you have to solve them with the gumshoe abilities, and then maybe you fight a monster at the end, or you fight a ghost, or whatever it is. So there has to be a more narratively straightforward approach to that. And if you're a more experienced, or you've played role-playing games for longer, those stories, that's like the opener. That's okay, now what happens? I get that we've had to have this setup, but now the crazy stuff is going to come down, right? And with an intro, we forget how much fun it was just to walk into that first haunted house in Call of Cthulhu and fight the floating knife. And the floating knife was just messed with all of us. It's like, how do we even, what? And we had no idea. Or in very early D&D, just walking down that tunnel and into that 10x10 room, that was excitement enough for us. But now, of course, if you're a multi-decadal D&D player, you've got to have, different gravity in one part of the room, or you've got to have an invisible ooze or something. And if you're a multi-decadal Call of Cthulhu player, you have to have a more ornate backstory and crazier conspiracy and newer ways to die. So I think a lot of it is it's always nice to be able to sell to the experts, but it's good, I think, for your reflexes, and I think it's good for the company and for the industry to make sure that the first kids coming in have a haunted house to walk through.
Yeah.
Now, will that be like the full rule set for that, or will it be more of like a quick start, more stripped down version of the rules for the starter set?
It will be a complete game. You'll be able to play Call of Cthulhu, but if you look at like the D&D starter set, or the Pathfinder starter set, or the Shadowrun starter set, or any of the other starter sets, those are compressed versions of the game, and then you can buy the full version and get more of it. And the question of exactly how compressed we're going to be, I look at something like the original first edition Star Wars role-playing game that I think Greg Kostikian wrote, that was the sample adventure also taught you how to play. And that was about 90 pages, maybe. It was 110 soaking wet. And that had full-on Star Wars activity. It was not a super thick book. It had lots of great Star Wars art in it, and you could play Star Wars forever from that book. And then obviously the next editions were much fatter and had more stuff going on in them. But I think that the notion of a starter game set is that you want to be able to have a very understandable first experience, and then if you can repeat that with multiple plays of that starter set, that's a bonus. And if you can take it and build it out, that's even better. But I think that our goal has to initially be getting people in the door, and then for a player who said, what we don't necessarily want to listen to, although of course we welcome their money, is someone who says, I've been playing Trail of Cthulhu since it came out. I think it's a great game. I'm excited to see your starter set, and I want all manner of great new different things. It's like, this may not be for you. You may want to wait for our next big Trail of Cthulhu release and let a 12-year-old kid play the starter set and see what that's about.
Right. Yeah, you got to get them young and introduce them to the eldritch horrors of the universe.
Right. Yeah, that's the goal. And then, it's not like we've got any shortage of crazy, ambitious things to do with Trail of Cthulhu for them either. We're working on Fall of Delta Green, which is going to be, a whole new batch of weirdness for Gumshoe that we haven't even begun to scratch the edges of in some cases. And obviously, we've got all manner of new adventures coming out. The Trail is a very robust line, and it can support a starter box as well as the sort of ongoing levels of strangeness. Steve Dempsey is right now putting together a campaign that's the magical reconstruction of Great Britain, and so we're going to be doing another sort of in-character or in-voice book about British secret architecture and secret history, the way that we did for London, for Bookhounds of London. So we got lots of stuff coming out for Trail, but it'd be nice to let the kids walk in and get up to speed.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I'm going to assume that's a cat.
Yeah, this one is an asshole. The other one, the good one's locked up in the bedroom. They don't get along real well. Yeah. The other one, she's older, so she's a like crazy old lady. Yeah.
No, Virgil was around here somewhere, but he wandered off when he discovered I was doing a podcast and not trying to work. I've been writing here right now, but.
Mine gravitate to the computer. I think I've had at least one cat on every podcast so far.
Oh, there you go. Now it's a shtick.
It kind of is, I guess.
Yeah.
So for your home group, I'm assuming you're probably sandboxing most of your adventures. You're not running any specific modules or anything like that.
I don't do a pre-written module. What I do usually is there's a incident or an event that I think would make a good story about. Right now the game we're running is Unknown Armies, and it's set in the historical Old West.
Oh,
and
cool.
Each session or each scenario is a different year. So we started in 1877, we played an 1876 flashback, we've done 1878, 1879, 1880, we did an earlier 1881, and now we're at Tombstone in 1881. So obviously I know that they're going to get themselves dragged into the gunfight at the OK Corral,
sure.
And we're going to have the Earps and the Clantons, and I know what's going on in Tombstone in 1881. Mm-hmm. And so I have to just figure out, A, how do I drag the players into it, and B, what kind of weird, horrible magic is actually going on. And once I know that, the players show up, and then the players have their agendas, and they pursue their own agendas. So in theory, although my players not being idiots, they knew they were not going to be fighting the Earps. They were going to be on the side of the Earps to the extent that they could. But they developed their own agendas and started to alter the geography of Tombstone and the magical geography in their way, so that the adventures have now really focused around their actions as opposed to their time tourists just sitting there eating a choco ice while they watch the gunfight. The goal is to have them drawn into whatever historical or magical event is happening, and then the sandbox, I sort of build the adventure around them as they find where in the sandbox to dig.
Sure.
But it's not quite as it's not quite as free floating as it's the Old West, go do something. What happens is we know what year it's going to be, which means we probably know what historical event it's going to be around, and then I can figure out how to tie that event into something magical and strange, which is not super hard.
Yeah. So are you playing this as a more alternate history or is it real history with a untold magical occurrence?
It's a secret history, right? It's
Okay.
like it's the latter. It's real history with an untold magical occurrence, but I'm not keeping it married to actual history. So, for example,
Okay.
there's a gunfighter named Charlie Storms who was a real historical gunfighter, and he really did go to Tombstone, and he really was sadly gunned down by another gunfighter, I think named Luke Short, before the gunfight at the OK Corral happened. So before the player characters got there. Well, I'd already been introducing him as a bad guy, and he historically would go around saying that he couldn't be killed. He was bulletproof. He was a bulletproof gunfighter, and you couldn't kill him with bullets. And it turns out you could kill him with bullets. But I'd like the idea of, in an Unknown Army sense, of a gunfighter who believes they're immune to bullets, and so he was showing up as sort of an enforcer for one of the bad guy groups. And so I kept him alive long enough to mess with the players in this adventure. And if they kill someone ahead of time, well, then they killed him ahead of time. So far, it doesn't make a giant bit of difference. I'm not going to change the outcome of the Civil War or something. But one of the things they tried to do is save the life of President Garfield. He gets assassinated by Charles Guiteau. He's lying there, dying of septicemic agony for 80 days. And they hear about it and they think, we should go to President Garfield's bedside and save his life with a mechanomantic device that we've invented. And after, finding all of the bad guys who are trying to prevent them, they get through there and they get to his bedside. And if they'd rolled well enough, they would have saved his life. And fine, so now I have President Garfield instead of Chester Alan Arthur. Now, as alternate histories go, that is not earth-shatteringly different. I mean, we sitting here right now would maybe have one or two things that are different in the world if Garfield had survived. But in the course of the game, as it transpired, they rolled a double odd and they killed President Garfield. I mean, technically, the bullet poisoning, the septicemic wound was already killing him, but they really, finished the job quite effectively. So they had to burn a lot of in-game favors to keep themselves out of military prison for the rest of their lives, which is kind of the fun of doing it. But yeah, it's mostly a secret history because that's the kind of, I think that's more fun. Like in the Dracula Dossier, aside from Dracula and the sort of individual characters around Dracula, the rest of that is real. That's all real stuff. There's real earthquakes where I say there's earthquakes. There's real dead MI6 guys where I say there's real dead MI6 guys. There are real mole hunts where we put in a mole hunt. Everything in that book, with one or two exceptions, and mostly because we didn't want to be sued, are real things, or are things that Bram Stoker invented. There's not an awful lot in that book that is just, it's not the World of Darkness, right? It's not this crazy, there's this giant hierarchy of a million super powerful vampires. Nope, we got one super powerful vampire, and his name is Dracula. And this is what's happening. And so in that way, it's the secret history, and but it's as closely tied to real world spycraft and real world historical events from 1894 forward as we possibly could. And it turns out when you look into Romania in 1940, there's a lot of stuff where you say, yeah, okay, I totally believe that there's an occult secret directory of MI6 involved in this. Because otherwise it makes no damn sense what they thought they were doing.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
So do you guys normally stick to one campaign for, a length of time, or do you guys vary systems at all, or are you kind of a one-system group?
We play the campaign until the campaign either loses its juice or it comes to a natural narrative end. Mm-hmm. So before Unknown Armies, we were playing the Coda system, which was the system that we designed at Decipher for Star Trek in an invented future space background, which the background we invented with Microscope, which I don't know if you know that, but it's a story game for building setting. So we collaboratively built the setting. And then I picked a spot in that collaboratively built setting where I wanted to tell the story, where I sort of saw the most pregnant story moment. And I said, all right, we're there. And then we ran it with Coda. Before that, we played Nobilis. Before that, I think we did a couple of Savage Worlds on and off just to sort of get everyone's feet wet or to kill a couple of weeks before the real campaign could start again.
Mm-hmm. And nice palate cleanser.
Yeah, palate cleanser. And then before that was the alpha playtest for Night's Black Agents, and I think I may be skipping one game that I ran in between the Night's Black Agents game and the Nobilis game. But if we usually play 18 months to 3 years worth of one game and then switch it out to another game because
Wow.
you know that gives you a good satisfying campaign arc, and it lets you sort of you know feel all the feels you wanted to feel with that particular system.
Sure.
And when I'm out of town at game conventions or whatever, I can't run, so it's not quite the same as it didn't actually last 3 years worth of sessions because I got 10 conventions a year, give or take, so there's at least 10 weeks that I'm not doing it.
Now you guys play
So it sounds
every...
like that. No.
No, go ahead, Jesse.
No, it just sounds like you've had the same group then, or at least the basics of the same group for quite a while now.
Yeah, I mean it's like the old the old Achilles ship, right? It loses a mast in Chios, and so he replaces the mast, and it loses the rudder in Rhodes, and so he replaces the rudder, and it loses the prow in Thessalonica, and he replaces the prow, and eventually they've rebuilt the whole ship, but it's still Achilles' ship. My campaign is sort of like that. I've got, I think, one player in it who was in it when I started it when I moved to Chicago in 1988. In between then, he moved to Minnesota and Fresno and Orange County and then back to Chicago. And when we moved back to Chicago, we put him right back in the campaign to let him know you can't escape that easily. But all of my other players have just joined it on or off, or have left on or off, either by leaving to go to other cities or because they've decided that they have other things to do on Monday night besides play role-playing games, which is
I don't understand that.
weird, but fine.
Some people.
Yeah. But I think our newest player is someone who just got at it about a year ago when he moved in into the house of the people who I'm playing it at right now. So he was a longtime gamer, and he just had moved to Chicago from North Carolina and didn't know a lot of people. So he wound up at a game that I was at, and it was like, hey, you're looking for a place to live? My friends are looking for someone to fill a bedroom. Take care of that.
Oh, and by the way, you can play too.
Yeah, if you must.
That's cool. Do you wind up generally running games? Do you actually get a chance to play in anything?
I've been the GM for life since 1979.
Wow.
I play sometimes, and sometimes one of my players will say, I want to run a game, and if I'm free, I'll play it. And every now and again, I play in games that other designers run as sort of experiments or play tests or whatever. But I probably GM 8 times for every 1 time I play in anything. I'm a GM by destiny, and I think by sort of predilection. I like that intellectual fun of building a world and letting players run into it and do things. It's just sort of my jam.
Okay, so you prefer that then?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I like to play, but the thing is, as a GM, you get all kinds of terrible habits that are bad as a player, like demanding to be the center of attention all the damn time.
Right.
That's a rotten habit in a player and a great habit in a GM, and so I don't know that I'm the world's best player as opposed to being a pretty good GM.
Right.
No, I've found that as a GM that we tend to make some of the worst players.
Yeah. I mean, I've been in games where game masters can take my measure and slap me down, but most of them are also my peers as game designers, so they are used to telling me to shut up on other contexts.
How does the convention gaming compare to running games at home? You prefer running games in mass settings like that, or how do you feel about that?
Well, the thing about a convention is that if I'm at a convention as a guest, as opposed to just wandering in there, the reason that I'm a guest is so that I can interact with people who come to the convention. And if I do a panel, I can interact with 10, 20, 30, 50 people, right? However many people can get into the panel room. If I'm running a game, I can interact with 4 or 6 people. And so as a general rule, and also because you have to be a lot more intense to run a game than you do to be on a panel, and so it burns you out a lot faster, I prefer at conventions to do panels or seminars or whatever as opposed to running a game. I've run games at conventions, but normally it's because they've got a charity situation, and so they're like, well, if you run this game, we'll give, like in Sweden, they did a thing where it's like, if you run this game, this special game for these people, then they've all bid some large amount of Swedish money and will give it all to children's cancer research. And it's like, well, I kind of don't want kids to get cancer. That seems all right. But by and large, to run a game at a convention is to mean that I can't be with anyone else at the convention for however long that slot is. And I think I would rather be with more people, and I think the people who weren't lucky enough to get to be in the game would rather that I not be closeted away with 3 people they don't know.
Sure. We ran into one of our Twitter follows was at Necronomicon while we were there, and we were trying to get together with her, schedule a couple of things. She said, "Yeah, I'm going to be upstairs in the game room like all weekend."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it can be hard to do. I mean, and obviously not everyone thinks the way that I do. Scott Glancy comes to these conventions and he goes off and he runs a campaign. And so what happens is you get 5 people at the end of that session who are the world's greatest Scott Glancy fans and will follow him to hell. And it's great. But A, a lot of times it's those same 5 guys. And B, Scott has not been out where I want to see him, much less anyone who paid money to get into the convention wants to see him. So I think it's sort of a 6 of one, half dozen of the other. And for my personal taste, I'd rather be out there for more folks than give those 5 people, sort of the intense, full-on, Scott Glancy experience. Not that I could even deliver the Scott Glancy experience.
Speaking of Scott Glancy, we're going to have him on the 19th. So about a week and a half, we're going to have Scott on as well.
Well, he's got the Delta Green Kickstarter going on, so he will have lots of reasons to talk that up, I'm sure.
Yep, I think he's finishing up, or I guess he was putting in the final pieces to get that ready to go with Dennis Detweiler. I guess Shane Ivey, too. I guess they're all in on that.
Yeah. The Dennis and Scott are the sort of guys who are still driving the pagan universe forward, and then Shane is the guy that they got to publish it. So good job, everyone. And then I get to sort of show up and get my name in books, which is the way that I like to do it.
There you go. How was speaking of Necronomicon a little bit, how was your experience at Necronomicon this couple of months ago?
Oh, I loved it. I thought it was great. It was really sort of a reward to myself because Gen Con was so crazily, stupidly early that as a result, we were unable to get Dracula Dossier out for Gen Con, which sort of, it was personally disappointing, as well as not being a super great marketing strategy to not have it at Gen Con. Sure. So Necronomicon was sort of my cry in my beer and feel better convention. And then also to sort of start, spreading the what I'm going to say is spread the word about Ken Hite's about stuff, about Fall of Delta Green, about Trail of Cthulhu, even to people who maybe are not part of the core role-playing experience, but might want to be part of at least the Cthulhu part of it that I do. I hadn't been to Providence since 1990 for the Centennial, so I just wanted to go see what Providence was like in the interim. And I've begun to know more and more of the sort of core Lovecraftians better just over time. And so a lot of them, like Bob Price or Mike Davis or whoever, it was just nice to be able to go and see them. And they're getting to be my peers and colleagues in the way that the other game designers are, and the HP Podcraft guys, for example. So I got to be on their panel quiz show, which was fun. I got to be on some panels, which was also fun. I got to meet the guys who put together Necronomicon, and I got to wander around Providence, which is a delightful city in all number of respects, regardless of the fact that they've finally begun to recognize that, oh yeah, we had one of the seminal figures of 20th century American culture live here. Maybe we should put up a sign or something. That'd be nice.
Yeah, and embrace that heritage a little bit.
In 1990, it was literally nothing. The city of Providence wanted nothing to do with Lovecraft. They'd never heard of him. They didn't care. I think the Providence Bulletin ran like an insert to talk about the Centennial, but that was it. And then now it's a much bigger deal, and the city has been working sort of overtime to rectify their shoddy neglect of HP, and Niels and them have sort of worked to emphasize the radical and the eccentric and the qualities in Lovecraft that we still love and admire, and let that be the message for the 21st century, as opposed to sort of being embarrassed about his weirdnesses and bad intellectual habits.
Yeah, yeah. It was hot while we were there, but that area. Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I'm out in Arizona now. That was not. See, out here, the humidity right now, I think today it's beautiful. I have all the windows open. I think the humidity might be about 15%.
Yeah, well, Arizona, you're not gonna. Getting anywhere near an ocean is going to sort of wake you up or put you to sleep or whatever it does. I've spent not a ton of time in the Southwest, but I've been out there plenty of times, and it's like, yeah, this is great as long as you weren't using your pores for anything.
Yeah.
Every year the Gamma Trade Show is in Las Vegas, and I've got some friends who live out in Vegas, so every now and then I go out there, and I've had my share of going out into Vegas in August and July and June, and yeah, I'm well aware what deserts are like. It's why no one lives in them.
It's not that bad. It's a dry heat.
Yeah. Well, I live in a city that's built on top of a swamp where the glaciers stopped. So we have literally 14 days of good weather a year in Chicago, not consecutive.
Yeah.
Just over the course of a year, 14 of them are nice.
I wound up in Chicago in February one year for work and stayed down at the Essex, kind of down by the waterfront.
Yeah.
Oof, man, it was brutal.
Yeah, every February I go to San Ramon, California for TundraCon, and now you know why.
No, the closest I ever got was St. Louis every July, and that was bad enough.
St. Louis is appalling under any circumstances, but July is the worst.
The downtown area there around the Biltmore and everything, they did seem to embrace what was going on. A lot of the shops had signs and advertisements and stuff, and that was nice to see. It was my first Necronomicon, so I never knew it any differently. But it was nice to see the town kind of embrace that. And we were in the elevator in the Biltmore, I think, with a couple of people, like, what are you here for? So we tried to explain to them about H.P. Lovecraft. They're like, oh, okay, like just and then out of the elevator they went.
Yeah, we were in the cab on the way to the hotel from the airport. The cab driver was like, "You guys are here for the Lovecraft thing, right?" And we're like, "Yeah, we are." And he says, "So, what's the deal with that?" I mean, he knew who Lovecraft was. He knew he was a writer, but he didn't know why you would have a convention about it. I mean, I think that, in fairness, I don't know why you would have a convention about it. It just seems the sort of thing that we do.
Right.
But yeah, no, I very much enjoyed it. I thought it was a great, fun time. I think everyone enjoyed themselves. We sold through all the copies of Goodnight Azathoth, which was what I wanted to do, make sure that all of the books that I was there to sign sold through nicely. And then my publisher, Hal Mangold of Atomic Overmind Press, and I just sort of made it a work trip so that we could talk business and figure out what we wanted to do. And so from that perspective, it was what we call a relaxicon, in that it was not a giant, solid, ongoing nightmare of booth running and paneling and everything else the way the Gen Con, for example, is. And so it was only about 2,000 people or whatever it was, which was good, and it was a big enough crowd that you felt like you weren't just dead, but it wasn't super busy, so you could have time for yourself or to go off and eat the really interesting ramen place that they have that has Korean pulled pork at it for some odd reason. There's all kinds of weird stuff going on in Providence.
Yeah. And the convention size, like you say, was nice, and it did give you a lot of time to kind of move around, and everybody was super approachable. I think I ran into you first over at the HP Podcraft, the live show. We were outside talking to Chris, and he said, "Oh yeah, Ken's here. He came in with me." I'm like, "All right, I'll be back. I'll see. I gotta go." And just randomly walk up to somebody and say, "Hi, I played your game, and we'd love to talk to you if you're interested." And you're like, "Yeah, sure, whatever. Here's my card. Friend me on Facebook." That's a really cool experience for somebody who's me for new getting into podcasting and having our own website and stuff. Everybody was just real friendly and real approachable.
It's generally a pretty friendly crowd. I mean, I think you have to be sort of a special kind of giant jerk to be all full of yourself at a convention full of people who are there to be fans of the same obscure, pointless thing that you're there to be a fan of. When I think back to, I've gone to a bookseller convention, and when I got an autograph from Clive Barker, and he was nice to me, And I'm an author, and he knew that I had an author badge on. What an author badge at a bookseller convention is it's like a badge saying I am a licensed thief. I'm here to steal your time and to steal your free copies of books and to provide you with nothing. That's what that's what an author badge means at the bookseller shows. And Clive Barker couldn't have been more generous and polite and delightful. And it's like, look, if Clive Barker is not going to throw me shade, who am I to throw some other person shade, especially at a Lovecraft show, for God's sake, where we're all there as celebrants and supplicants of something bigger and better than ourselves. You know, we're none of us, you know, we're none of us all that compared to Howard. So why not be buddies together, right?
Right. No, for sure. I agree.
Now, you come up to one of us at Gen Con and we're just dead. We might want to be nice, but there's just no energy or time for it. But at a nice show like Necronomicon, that kind of interaction should be happening all the time.
Mm-hmm. It was very laid back. I mean, there was, you know, like I said, we didn't do any of the gaming just because there, like you say, you were locked up for a couple hours and you're, you know, just with a handful of people, and you know there was not a ton of things going on, but there was enough things on to keep you busy that we still missed
it was
tons
a pretty
of stuff.
solid panel track. There was a lot of stuff going on. There was movies if you wanted to go catch some of the films that they brought out. I mean, and the City of Providence was right there. They were doing the walking tours. So if you hadn't, you know, walked past Lovecraft's house or gone up to see where the church on Federal Hill used to stand before they knocked it down like a bunch of vandal jerks, you could do that. It was a terrific thing.
Yeah, we went up to the graveyard where Lovecraft and Poe used to hang out. Yeah, that was a pretty neat experience.
So you went to St. John's, not to Swan Point where he's buried.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
St. John's.
Yeah. It was hot, so we didn't do the whole tour, but we went into the Athenaeum and, you know, kind of up in that area there. But it was super hot that day.
Yeah, no, it was the weather kind of broke a little bit later and became tolerable, but that first couple of days was pretty monstrous. Fortunately, most of the convention was indoors, so haha.
That's true. Let's see, Jesse, you have anything?
Actually, so would I be right in guessing that your love of Lovecraft came before your designing of Trail of Cthulhu then?
Oh yeah, my love of Lovecraft dates back to reading The Color Out of Space in a Groff Conklin anthology. And I don't know if you ever read any Groff Conklin anthologies when you were a kid or now, but he was a prolific anthologist of science fiction and fantasy short stories. And most of his stories came out of the pages of Astounding magazine, good old John W. Campbell, where jut-jawed, blonde, blue-eyed Earthmen of all races, creeds, and colors show alien monsters what for. And every now and again, he'd bring in something from outside that Campbellian tradition and put them into the anthologies, and I was reading through one of them, and in the middle of the thing was The Color Out of Space. And I was 11, whatever I was, and so I'm reading the aliens, gonna beat the aliens, and then all of a sudden you hit Color Out of Space, and it was like the world had just fallen away from out from under me. And I remember sitting on my couch in the afternoon sunlight, in Oklahoma City, the least scary moment in time that probably can be imagined in North American history, and just being utterly terrified by that story. And then I discovered in the garage a whole paperback full of this stuff that my dad had bought and, you know, stored in the garage, and I sort of rationed out those stories bit by bit over the next year or so to make sure that I didn't run out of Lovecraft. And I read Shadows over Innsmouth at summer camp by the dock at night after curfew. I snuck out of the cabin and went down to the dock because that's where they had the lamp that was always on for boat safety. And so I was sitting there underneath the lamp on the dock reading Shadow over Innsmouth, and I think that sort of finished the job of making me a permanent 112% ultra Lovecraftian. And so I've been a Lovecraft fan since forever, and I've been a huge Lovecraft fan, and it was because I was a Lovecraft fan that when I saw Call of Cthulhu, I instantly knew I had to own that game and then play that game. And of course, the fact that it was also the greatest role-playing game of all time, that sort of, you know, that proved I was right, I guess, retrospectively.
Oscar Rios made fun of me because I came to a lot of this stuff a little bit later, so I don't have a similar, you know, when I was young, I play games or came to Lovecraft or any of these sorts of things.
No,
It
no.
was,
As long as you're here now, it doesn't matter when you got here. We're not. It's not the Mayflower, you know.
yeah. I'm a late edition.
Yeah, I'll bet I predate Oscar anyway. So tell him to back off.
Oh boy. Yeah, I guess you didn't make it up to that party at Necronomicon, huh?
I've made it up to a number of parties, but I didn't make it up to the one that you guys were so loud that you got thrown out of again.
Yeah.
I was at a perfectly nice house party, and then I went to the Red Fez, where lots of people seemed very eager to buy me a drink. So,
Oh, nice.
That's kind of a terrific bar. When I walk in, people who don't know me want to buy me drinks. That seems like I've chosen well.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Let's see, what else do we have? So, was the Dracula Dossier not your first Kickstarter? I'm sorry, I can't say that I'm super familiar. Have you run other Kickstarters before? Or?
This was the first one that I was sort of in a I don't say lead role, because Kat Tobin at Pelgrane was really in the lead role, but it was the first one that I was sort of a key principal in. I've been the stretch goal in a lot of people's Kickstarters up until then, and but this is the first one where it was really sort of my work was going to be on the line as the main thing you were buying, mine and Gareth Ryder Hanrahan's. And so this was the first one that I sort of really leaned into the social media and really, hit the podcast rounds and did a ton of promotion for. And even the current Delta Green one, although Fall of Delta Green is a core product in it, an add-on, it's really the Pagans and Arc Dreams show, and I just get to show up and say, "Hey kids, I'm also in, also starring Ken." I'm right. Like Alec Baldwin and Glengarry Glen Ross. I come on for one scene, I kill, and I leave again.
And how was your experience in doing that? How did you find Kickstarter to be as a venue for?
Well, again, because I'd been sort of on the edges of other people's Kickstarters, I sort of knew what I was letting in for. But there is no degree of intellectual preparation that can make up for the fact that you really are spending a solid month desperately interested in what other people think all the time on the internet, and that doesn't usually happen to me. I'm a monster of arrogance, and I actually have, every day when I wake up, I go to the Kickstarter. I stay on that Kickstarter all day. I'm responding to comments. I'm providing things. We're always scrambling to come up with new stretch goals. Kat is sort of riding herd on us. We've always got a new podcast to do, or a new interview to do, or a new article to write, or a new promo material to put together. Just a real intensive period of work. And again, I can't stress enough that Kat was doing all of the actual hard work on it, and I was literally just being trotted out as content monkey. And so it was still a huge, just like being caught up in a wave, just tumbled and bumbled all over the place experience. And so I'm happy that ours worked really well, that people really liked the product and really backed the vision, and I'm really happy that we got it out, and it is on its way to backers even as we speak. So those both really make me happy. I'll be eager to see what our next Pelgrane Kickstarter is, because I think it did well enough that Pelgrane going forward are going to sort of make it a premier. We don't want to just drain our well of support, but I think every year, or maybe every other year, we'll have a sort of an alpha product that gets a Kickstarter to it, and knowing that we're going to have Kat writing herd on us, knowing what we know now, I think we're only going to get better and better at running it. And I think our first one actually went pretty darn well, as you say, given that was my first what I want to say, central role in a Kickstarter, or full-on role in a Kickstarter.
But that kind of leads into my next question then. Do you feel like Kickstarter is going to be just the way books are going to be released in the future for the industry? Do you think that with as much stuff as there is out there, it's going to be harder to do traditional publishing, as it were?
Well, I think it's been harder and harder to do traditional publishing for everyone, not just the role-playing game industry. The role-playing game industry is sort of the canary in the coal mine of conventional retail, conventional publishing, conventional content management. I mean, the answers that we came up with in 2005 are the answers that the big 6 publishers right now are saying, oh, I hope that's not the answer. But, of course, they are. So, in a lot of ways, Kickstarter, part of the reason that the game component, the tabletop game component, is so strong in Kickstarter is because we really are at the forefront of how everyone is going to be interacting with their fans. The internet breaks down and disintermediates, right? I now have a direct connection to someone who wants to read my stuff. In the old days, you couldn't do that. You had to, go through the literary magazines, or you had to go through the publishers, you had to go through any number of middlemen and gatekeepers to get to the person you actually wanted to talk to, in my case, the customer, and in the reader's case, the author. And now that isn't true. So anything that makes it possible for reader and author to connect more closely, both on a financial but also on a creative or intellectual level, that's going to happen whether we want it to or not. And I think that Kickstarter, itself has done a lot more right than it has done wrong in the crowdfunding model. But even if Kickstarter went away tomorrow, crowdfunding is here forever, right? As long as there's an internet, there's going to be crowdfunding. And I think that right now, Kickstarter, especially Luke Crane being in charge of their game component, I mean, talk about picking the right guy for the job. As long as they have a savvy handle on what it takes to be a player in the tabletop games market and marketing, they're going to be able to stay ahead of whatever changes happen and just keep accelerating as more and more people start understanding that although Kickstarter may never entirely replace conventional retail, it's going to be more and more and more an important part of what actually gets produced and gets to retail. Because if you can't interest your 300 or 500 or 1,000 or 1,500 core fans in a product, there's no way you can interest 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 strangers in it, right? Because those guys could go out and buy something else that they have already heard of or that they like better. So I think that Kickstarter is great as a proof of concept. It's great just on the level of it pays for the printing ahead of time. And I think it's great because it provides fans a bonus for being your fans early, because they get all the PDFs and whatever else. And also it lets them have more of a say in what's produced for them. So I think it's terrific. I think it empowers everyone, and that's sort of the direction that the internet goes. And if you're not going to go there, then you can stand on the sidelines shaking your fist, but it's going to keep going there.
No, it's funny. I actually, back in, I believe it was 2010, had a brief discussion with Luke Crane about RPGs on Kickstarter at a PAX panel. And my worry originally back then was that Kickstarter would cause the board game and the RPG market to get flooded with games and kind of water it down and water everyone's interest. But it seems like almost the exact opposite's happened now. Is that that there's a lot more games available to people, but
here's the thing, right?
They've almost become more focused.
I mean, when you walk into a Borders, when there were Borders, but if you walk into a big bookstore, a Barnes and Noble, a Borders, or whatever, a really big good, a Powell's in Chicago or Portland, is your interest in books made smaller or made greater by that?
Right.
Right. I mean, Kickstarter just allows a bigger marketplace to potentially exist. And if you are the kind of person whose self-image is, I'm buying all of the good games, then you're going to get really, really tired and bankrupt. But if what you are is a consumer who's like, I don't know what I want, but I'll bet Dracula fighting spies sounds pretty great, well, now you can do that because that got produced. I don't think anyone who ever says that the problem of choice is a problem, those people are communists and should be ignored. Right? You don't walk into the supermarket and say, "Oh, I'm tired of food. There's too many foods. That's awful."
Just give me one apple, one steak. That's
one
it.
Food. All I want is one cereal. Whatever you think is right. Cereal? No human has ever thought that. And I think the same thing about gaming. I think if you go into a really great game store, then you're jazzed up about games, and the internet is the greatest game store of all. And if you know enough about Kickstarter as to how to navigate it and say, really? There was a whole game about somnambulistic bears that fight in Vietnam or whatever it was? You're like, well, I want that. I didn't know I wanted that, but now I super want that.
Now that someone's made it, I want it.
but yeah, I don't think that that's how markets work, and I'm sure it's not how Americans work.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know for myself, getting involved into the Kickstarter, I jumped in with both feet and probably kickstarted too many things. And last month had about 4 or 5 projects all come up at the same time, and I got my got my credit card bill. I was like, that may not have been the best strategy. But I definitely have some good looking games coming to play. I've roped my brother into playing quite a few of these games with me. We typically run a big BattleTech game on Friday nights, and we've been in between. So I've roped him into playing a lot of these other board games and card games and stuff. So.
Right. Yeah, well, it's great for that. I mean, because bottom line, things are getting produced that would not have gotten produced without it, and that's all to the good. Certainly, if you're interested in playing games, we're in the middle of a pretty long-running golden age of game creation, to my way of thinking.
Yep. I mean, there's certainly a lot more indie companies now. It's so much more accessible for people to be able to get their ideas out with things like Kickstarter and stuff like that. And like you say, the proof of the concept. If you put it up and people don't migrate towards it, you go back and retool or you dump it and maybe try to come back with something else.
But what you don't have is a whole garage full of product that no one wants to buy, which is what used to happen.
Exactly.
I mean, before we had the internet, before we had Kickstarter, and I'd go to Origins or I'd go to Gen Con and I'd see someone selling their elf game, and they'd say, it's D&D, but with a much longer skill list and 14 kinds of orcs. And I would say, oh my god, your poor wife or sister or whoever it is who co-signed a mortgage like an idiot to let you print this thing. But in Kickstarter, they put it up there and no one likes it. Well, everyone's been saved a ton of money and time. Right. And if people do like it, great. You found the 1,400 people who want those kind of orcs and skill lists, and you'll all be very happy together, and I won't have to be pestered with it.
Exactly. And like you said, a lot of the stuff that once a Kickstarter is successful, that stuff will be coming to either your local game store or Amazon or wherever you normally get your games at.
Or at the very least, you can get it on PDF from the publisher, from DriveThru or wherever it is you want to go get your PDFs from. Because again, sort of going hand in hand with crowdfunding is the notion of the disassociation of content from physical items. Yeah. So even the hardest core Luddite, and I think that if you can look at the background of my view, you can see that I'm perfectly fond of hard copy books and games. It's pretty convenient to be able to also have a lot of stuff on PDF that you can carry around on your tablet or you can carry around on your laptop and not have to throw your poor back out hauling around to a game group.
No, especially where I run a Pathfinder game, it's so much easier. I love, like you said, I love having my books, and I love to be able to go to the book when I'm at home and take the time to do that. But for quick reference during a game, or if I'm out and about, pulling it up on my phone or tablet, that PDF saves me so many times and just kind of burns so much time for me.
And printing books is expensive, and keeping them in inventory is expensive. It's a tax hit now to have books piled up in a warehouse. And so the existence of the PDF market means nothing's ever out of print. You can go back and you can buy games that are 10, 15, 25 years old, which you couldn't have ever bought unless you were near a really terrible game store. And so as a result, those games can be fresh to you. You can play them tomorrow. You can go back and dig out stuff for, second edition D&D that no one haven't seen the light of day since forever. Those are up wherever the hell they are, and you pull them down, and there you go. You've got an awesome game in PDF. And, it's not like they get stale. It's not like, oh, well, this one smells so Reagan-y. I don't want to play that. No one thinks that way. The games are like books. They're a timeless medium.
Yeah. No, unfortunately, there still are some companies out there that haven't quite caught on to that, but
well,
hopefully eventually.
That's what the cruel hand of capitalism will sort out for them.
Right.
I guess I must be the Luddite because I still haven't really made the switch over to PDF. I just can't do it.
I mean, again, you can see from that I'm not lying. have not made the switch over to PDF, but for a guy who swore that they'd never have a game library on PDF, I've got a pretty great game library on PDF right now.
It's a great in addition to.
Yeah, and then it's if you can only get a game in PDF, there are games that you didn't hear about until after the guy sold through his print run, and he's so happy to have sold through his print run, he's never going to reprint.
Yeah.
You might want their
Glad
game.
I did that once.
Yep, that was a terrible, beautiful idea. But now you can buy it in PDF, and you still get the fun of reading their awesome game about whatever it was, and they get money, and no one has to go into the garage and say, I thought I told you to clear these stupid books out.
Well, having moved a handful of times in the last couple of years, my friends pretty much hate me for moving all the books that I've had.
I think maybe they should take out a collection and get you a PDF reader.
Yeah.
And a collection of oil-soaked rags.
Something, yeah. And the funny thing is, now that I'm in Arizona, I don't plan on moving away from here. I've actually started to parse down my book collection.
Yep. Well, they'll just find your bleached bones there in the desert.
Yeah. Surrounded by my books. All right, let's see. Yeah, I guess we're kind of... So this is the way it normally goes. We'll run for a little while and then kind of start to draw blank and kind of hit that end moment. But we do have something to kind of round out the podcast that we've been doing for a little while now, called the Final Five.
Okay.
And it's geeky related questions. I mean, you can answer them a yes or no, or if you have a lengthy explanation, that's fine too. It may stimulate other conversation, but I guess we can move into that if you don't have anything, Jesse.
No, I'm following you. That's good.
Okay, I'm taking the lead.
Jesse's got a beer. Jesse doesn't care.
Yeah. Hey, we're just happy he's not sleeping.
Yeah.
Normally on Thursday.
It's not 10:30 yet.
Yeah, we played.
That's riveting video to watch a guy sleep. It's like Paranormal Activity, only without the demons.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
Pretty sure it's somewhere on YouTube.
Yeah. For the Dragon Fisters, we podcast on Thursday nights, which, for Jesse and the rest of the crew is, 10:30 for them. And in most sessions, he'll wind up falling asleep. So we haven't played a lot in the last couple of months.
Well, you don't want to fall asleep while fisting a dragon. That I think is absolutely what little I know about it would indicate. Don't do that.
Not a good outcome.
They're much bigger. They drag you around at that point.
At least
Dirty
they do that. That's the best case scenario. You're dragged.
Minimally. All right. Well, we'll hit you with the first question here. Star Trek or Star Wars?
Star Trek.
Oh, sacrilege. Okay.
No, Star Trek. Star Trek. I did 2 role-playing games in Star Trek. Star Trek is the universe where people have jobs. Star Wars is the universe where people say, turn off the targeting computer and let hippie magic solve it.
I guess that's true.
Actually, that goes to show you that the people with jobs are the bad guys in Star Wars.
Exactly. Yeah, the only people with a regular income in Star Wars are the bad guys.
Mm-hmm.
That's
true.
No way to be. That's a terrible universe.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, it's all weird puppets giving you mind trips. No one wants that. No, you want to have a library computer with all human knowledge and a door in the wall that will make your hot tea the way you like it, and all manner of great stuff. No, Star Trek in a heartbeat.
Okay, and that may be a generational thing too, because you're just a little bit older than I am.
Yeah, well, that's with age comes wisdom.
All right, we'll leave it.
No, your little cartoon space wizards are fine. I don't mind this. This is not a me or you thing. It's just
we're embracing
he's better,
right? All right. This is probably a no-brainer, but tabletop or video games?
Tabletop. My reflexes stopped being faster than computer reflexes sometime in the 80s. Zaxxon was far too confusing for me. And it's like, all right, I've been overmastered by this magical new technology. And then for a while, I had Sid Meier's Civilization, and it turns out that is a great game to own if you want to be divorced and bankrupt.
Right.
So I de-installed it and I hid the discs. I don't know where they are. They're somewhere in this morass of stuff. So if I wanted to play Civilization, it would take me almost as long to find it as it would to play it at this point. But no, I have so many other ways to waste my time on the internet that I don't need new, exciting ones. I know that they're really great, and I know tons of people who really, really love them, and I've written for one or two of them, which is a great gig. But oh my God, am I the wrong kind of person to play them? I'm no good at the twitching, and I'm too involved in the involved ones, so it would just be a nightmare. So yeah, tabletop is my speed.
Yeah, me too. I gave up on computer games after Super Nintendo. There's too many buttons for me.
It's just I can't both be Batman and work your crazy fighter pilot machine. Not possible.
Exactly.
No, you know, and I used to be a World of Warcraft addict, and when I /played and saw that I had done that for a total of several days on end, that's when I gave up.
Yeah, no, it's when you're you know, what happened with me was Civilization, and my wife saying, put the game away and come to bed, and I said in one more play. She says, yes, that's what you said yesterday. And then I went to bed, and now I'm telling you again, put the game down and go to bed.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, that may have been a bad sign right there.
Yep.
So,
When she wakes up at 1 o'clock in the morning, go to the bathroom, and you're still up playing.
she woke up at 7 in the morning and I was still playing. That was the problem.
Was it Civilization 2?
Yeah, it was Civ 2.
That's the one. I same thing. I played for like days on end.
Yeah, and I would do it again. I would do it in a heartbeat. And I have friends who play like the more advanced ones, and they come and they tell me all the awesome stuff that you can do now. Oh, you'd love it, Ken. It's so great. It's like, no, shut up with your lying mouth. I don't want to hear it.
Well, see, that's the thing with that game. It's almost never not your turn or something's going on, because if you end your turn, the computer goes, and you're like, oh crap, I've got to do all these
things. Now I have to fix this. Yes, exactly. Yep. No, it's a devil machine. I mean, I do what I can. I own a Macintosh, so no one makes games for me, but still, you just 2-3 years, they come around. Jerks.
Nice. All right. DC or Marvel?
I grew up DC. I'm old school DC. My first awareness that there was something called cool was Jim Apato's art on Batman, and then Jim Apato's art on everything. The Legion of Superheroes was a very important part of my early adolescence, for the Mike Grell, Jim Cockrum reasons that it was for a lot of people my ages. So I was always, and I liked the sort of the bright colors and the huge cast of DC. I liked Captain America. I liked Daredevil. I liked some individual Marvel stuff, but the whole Marvel universe just seemed like a very sort of tight, closed, incestuous land where not a lot of things ever happened, and everyone was whiny. And then DC has sort of lost the plot pretty seriously in the last few years. I don't know that Marvel has been any super better, but they've been better at calving off their good stuff so that I don't have to pay attention to the bad stuff. And then again, Marvel, Ken Feige at the Marvel movie division is sort of awoken everybody's interest in Marvel. So even if you weren't a Marvel fan, I defy you to come out of Captain America 2 and not be a Captain America fan. I mean, the saving grace is that their television unit is so terrible that I at least can keep my DC fandom and watch Arrow and Flash and feel better about that. So I'm still sort of an old school DC fanboy, even if DC is no longer an old school DC fanboy, I guess. I mean, but they really have just been reeking of desperation for the better part of a decade with the New 52 and the whole rest of it. It's just not happy. And Marvel is better even at catering to old farts with with their Marvel Unlimited app, where you can get all of Marvel for one price. Like, why is DC not doing that? They're the ones with the actually interesting universe. What's going on with you people? I mean, when you have to explain to Time Warner how intellectual property works, that you shouldn't have to do that. I should not be smarter than them. That's not how the universe is supposed to work. But yeah, I think Marvel has made a lot of really great decisions in this century, and DC is not, and it's a shame because Superman and Batman are better than everybody.
Yeah, I agree.
Don't worry about it. Marvel's doing their own universe reset very soon, actually. So
yeah,
They're
But
probably
again, I
gonna screw that
mean,
up
with
anyway.
as long as you're only paying attention to the Ultimates and maybe Matt
Yeah,
Fraction on Hawkeye, you don't care what they do with the real universe.
that's a
It's
really good
like,
point.
oh, yeah, whatever. Thor's a girl and whatever, fine.
Right.
What did you think of the Christian Bale Batman and that whole
Um,
series?
well, if you're, I like to think of it as the Christopher Nolan Batman. And of
Yeah.
course, when you're filming Batman in Chicago, you are really speaking to my heart. I I thought Batman Begins was. I'm not a fan of origin stories anyway. I thought that one was the weakest of the three movies. Obviously, like every right-thinking human, I really loved The Dark Knight because it
Mhm.
made the great decision of making basically making a Hong Kong crime film. Only Batman was in it, and I think that superhero movies work really, really well if they are another kind of movie with a superhero in it, as opposed
Mm-hmm.
to a superhero movie.
Right.
So, for example, Captain America 2
Yep.
was a conspiracy movie with Captain America in it. And so the fact that Dark Knight was a crime movie with Batman in it made it a really strong movie. And I super liked
Heath Ledger.
the third one, the
Mm-hmm.
Dark Knight Rises,
Return. Yeah.
because I'm a fan of the Burkean lament is not a thing that you see a lot of movies about, and so as a Burkean myself, the fact that someone made a Burkean movie and it was Batman, again, I'm going to be a real fan of that. I thought that worked really well, and I thought that the casting was pretty great. I thought that
Mm-hmm.
Anne Hathaway did a terrific job as Catwoman. I thought that Talia was really great, and everyone loves the way that Tom Hardy played Bane, even though it was sort of a weird version from the comic books, but it felt good in the moment. So I really liked the last two of the trilogy. The first one kind of hit or miss, but there was parts of it that were excellent, right? Sort of me,
Yeah.
and the whole bit with the scarecrow. Those were both terrific.
Right.
No, and I mean, I'm with you. I was a big fan of the third one, going kind of against current for some reason, and I'm actually a
trust me,
huge fan.
it made $1 billion, so it's not
right,
like we were really against the current.
Right, but no, I mean, I've actually been a big Bane was always one of my favorite antagonists, but in every iteration of it ever since, you always see him as the big dumb hulking guy, and they give him no purse. So I like the fact that they kind of brought it closer to the original concept and actually made him smart again and gave him a personality, and it was just the bulk and the strength was the side job of it. It wasn't his main focus.
Yeah, I mean, they could have done I mean, you can nitpick movies all day. You can even nitpick great movies all day. I think that they could have done a better job of the fight choreography, for example, in the third movie.
Yeah.
That was, if there's a flaw to it, that's really what it is that the fights made no sense dramatically or balletically as fights. But I think that, pretty much all the rest of the notes I really liked. I thought it hit it really well.
Yeah.
And, I'm not one of those people who believes that superheroes need closure. So the notion that this will be the last Batman movie is sort of pointless to me. But I thought that given that that's what Nolan wanted to do, I think he did it really well. And I think that they established a lot of, really nice stuff about their sort of cinematic version of the universe.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, it could have been filmed in Chicago instead of Pittsburgh. That would have been nice. But hey, whatever.
And what do you feel about Ben Affleck coming up as Batman? Do you think this is going to get any sort of I mean, I know it's Batman, it's going to make a lot of money, but I mean, you also have George Clooney Batman, which is just an abomination.
It's Zack Snyder, and Zack Snyder has demonstrated, I think, pretty conclusively that whatever else his creative vision is good for, it's not good for superheroes. He was able to do an all right job with Watchmen because Watchmen was already about having a dark, horrible vision of superheroes.
Right.
His Superman was a travesty, and the only reason to watch this new one is because it's going to be Batman having watched Man of Steel saying, well, I don't know anything else about Superman, but this is a travesty. So we're going to be there saying, no, kill Zack Snyder, not Superman, Batman, you're doing it backwards. But again, it shows every sign of that DC flop sweat where they're jamming every single superhero into it. It's going to be a big goofy mess. It's going to be filmed through the bottom of a coal mine somewhere. It's not going to be, I mean, unless I'm incredibly wrong, which I would love to be, but I don't think it's going to be attractive or interesting. And since that's kind of what I go to movies for, you know, I'll watch it on cable or something.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
I doubt that it's going to be worth me spending $12 to go see. Maybe I'll Patreon me writing a terrible review of it or something.
You could do it on the Emmy Award-winning Ken and Robin Talk About Stuff podcast.
I could. Maybe that could be a level for our Patreon is get Ken or Robin to see a movie that's terrible and then be mean about it.
Be like Mystery Science Theater 3000 or whatever the hell that show was called.
Yes, or more like Siskel and Ebert, except just for bad ones. Because we don't see the good movies for free.
Right. Cool. All right. Sci-fi or fantasy?
By and large, science fiction, but only because so much fantasy is second world fantasy, secondary world fantasy. So it takes place on some nebulous other continent or some stupid other world land that doesn't exist. And so, you know, if you're J.R.R. Tolkien, all right, I'll let you get away with it. But if you're not, no.
Put in a lot of time.
Yeah, put your stupid fantasy world connected up to the real world. Make it a magical history, an alternate history, or something. So if you're going to do a fantasy world, for example, the Game of Thrones, I am one of the 9 people in the world that would like it a million times better if it took place in the actual Wars of the Roses and had dragons and zombies and whatever else, instead of being in a Wars of the Roses fanfic country. Right? It's like now I literally have no connection to anything going on in this world except for the power of your storytelling. And since it's one of these modern day doorstop, thuddingly, forever taking zillion viewpoint, none of them do anything novels, I don't. I was given the chance to be the line developer for the Game of Thrones game back when it was Guardians of Order that had the license. And, you know, thank God I didn't like reading the novel enough to say yes, because that would have been an expensive proposition to be stuck with. But yeah, I got 100 pages in. I'm like, the only person in this book that I care about is the direwolf, and I suspect they're not going to be a main viewpoint character, so forget it. But if that had been set in, you know, England, and that had been, you know, the Prince of York and the Duke of Lancaster, I'd have a reason to follow, because I'd say, oh, I know what happens. How do we work dragons into it? You know, so science fiction for me, because it is connected to the actual world, or at least potentially connected to the actual world, I begin with a bias in favor of it. But I'm a super fan of secret histories and sort of wainscot fantasies that happen behind the real world. So Tim Powers, for example, is one of my favorite authors ever, and he's a fantasy author. He just is he writes his fantasies about history, not about, you know, some imaginary bunch of people in a New Zealand landscape somewhere.
Right. That was one of the things that Oscar made fun of me of, because I hadn't read Lord of the Rings or any of the books growing up. I didn't come to them until after the movies were released. And, you know, once the movies were coming out, I said, well, there's no point in me reading these, because if they're not as good as the book, it's going to be a complete waste of time. So I didn't read the books until after the movies.
No. And now, did you read them now?
Yeah, after Return of the King, after we went to go see it, I picked them up, and I probably took me 6 or 9 months to get through them all. But
well, they're long.
Yeah,
there's a lot of elven poetry.
Yep. I read the Silmarillion, the whole soup to nuts. I read the whole thing.
Well, then you're better than me. The Silmarillion, that's a bridge too far for me. That's like the Book of Mormon. That's just it's a lot of stuff that I'm not going to be. It's not going to be on the quiz, man.
Right.
Yeah.
And I own it. I've tried.
Really strong, super Tolkien fan. So if I really care what the Vale of Mornoth was like in the First Age, I can ask.
That's probably true. But I figured for completeness.
You're wrong.
Yeah, it was quite an adventure. Vince, I think, reads them. I think once a year, maybe around this time of the year. I think he pulls them out.
There are many people who are as deeply involved with Professor Tolkien as I am with Mr. Lovecraft, and on the surface of it, for a better reason. It's just that that's not really my line of country. I really admire and respect what he did. I think that if you have any kind of grounding in the medieval epic or the old British poetic cycle, reading those is like crazily informative and interesting. But as far as like going to live in Middle-earth, no thank you. I would rather go and spend my fictive existence somewhere that has, recognizable languages and maybe the chance of an internal combustion engine now and again.
That's true. That's true. And the last one, I guess you've kind of already answered sort of offhandedly. To say Apple or PC. Or Mac or PC.
I've got I'm not an Apple cultist. I own an Apple because when I took the job with Chaosium to be line developer for Nephilim, they said you need to have a Mac, and I'd had PCs all the time, but I was, well, if I got to do it to get the job, fine. And I bought my Mac, and it was, simple and idiot-proof, and as a simple idiot, I admired that. And, I've just kept buying Macs. The price differential is actually not that great anymore, and they remain, generally impervious to whatever stupidity I can unleash on the computer. So, they're all fine, and they have the advantage of not being able to play video games, which is like a huge advantage for me. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a cultist. I'm not going to sit here and tell you how Mac is blah, 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 Xerox PARC, GUI, blah, fall asleep, whatever. And I'm not remotely good enough at PCs to build my own and get like all the performance bonuses that you can if you know what you're doing. Again, I have friends who are super tech heads, and I nod and smile when they do it, and I'm sure they're having a great time. But 90% of the reason they do that is so that they can play video games that I don't play. I mean, what I need a computer for is go on the internet and word processing, and Macintosh has been able to do that since before there was an internet, really. So, yeah. I mean, again, I'm not a cultist about it, but I see no reason to jump off a boat that isn't sinking.
There you go. Yeah, some people get pretty crazy about it. I've always been a PC guy myself. Back in the day, Apple was just so much more cost prohibitive to even get in on, and then throw in there, well, I can't buy all of these products because none of this is supported.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, back in the day when it was just the little boxy thing, that would have been a pretty strange decision unless you really were in the graphic arts and wanted to just jump onto the early Mac Paint and stuff like that. But now the price differential is almost nothing for machines of similar quality, and I just like the fact that I don't have to make a bunch of hard decisions that I would not know anything about. I'm a humanities nerd. I'm the weakest, most pusillanimous kind of nerd. I have no powers and no skills.
No, that's probably most of us, right? I mean, we turn it on and hope that everything is going to work so we can sit down and check our emails.
There's a surprising percentage of people, many of them in my generalized fan base, who know an awful lot about what the hell it is they're doing, and I salute those people.
I am not one of those people.
Yeah.
All right, that's all the questions that I have. I don't have. Is there anything that you want to bring up? Anything else that you want to talk about before we kind of wrap things up?
I mean, I guess I've already plugged Dracula Dossier. I've plugged Fall of Delta Green. My last plug, and you were nice enough to plug Ken and Rob and talk about stuff. I guess my last plug would be for Ken Writes About Stuff, which is a PDF series that I do monthly for Pelgrane Press, in which I write 11 pages of something. Sometimes it's a rules extension for Gumshoe. Sometimes it's a complete little campaign world. Sometimes it's a look at a Lovecraft monster from all kinds of different angles, the Hideous Creatures sub-series. It's just whatever I feel like doing and whatever Simon and Kat feel like publishing. So it's kind of interesting and kind of fun, and if you want to, you can buy the individual singles a month after they come out on your favorite downloadable PDF site or from Pelgrane directly, or save some nickels and subscribe for a year. And that, I think, is the smart way to do it if you, like me, want to see what I'm doing every month.
Right. There you go. So everybody go subscribe. Head out to Amazon or Pelgrane and order Dracula Dossier. That's released in October.
Or your fine local game store. If I'm sure that they'll be more than happy to pre-order them for you. That's what game stores do.
Yep, they usually give you a little discount too if you ask nice.
Well, I can't speak to that, but I can say that if they're a Bits and Mortar game store, you'll get the PDF for free right away. So that's a discount enough as far as I'm concerned.
Awesome. Jesse, you have anything you want to interject here at the end?
No, pretty much covered everything. Looking good.
Sweet. All right. Well, I want to thank you for coming on, Ken. We had a good time. We're glad to have get to chat with you for a little bit.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on, guys.
If you have something coming up in the future you want to come back on, we'd be more than happy to get you back on and plug whatever you've got going.
I am sure that something can be arranged as once more the gaping maw of Kickstarter opens wide, and I'll let you guys know whenever that is.
Excellent. Yes. Yeah. Keep us in mind. Like I said, we're more than happy to have you on here.
No, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me on, letting me do my little dance.
Sure. Absolutely. All right, so that's it, everybody. Thank everybody for listening, downloading. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, you can hit us up on our Twitter page. You can reach us on Facebook. You can get the contact page on the website. We're always looking for your feedback. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you don't like. I mean, I can't imagine there's anything that you don't like, but, I mean, whatever it is, the internet.
Yeah, you try it. You think it's so easy, jerks.
All right, so thanks, everybody. This was episode 11 of the Legends Tabletop Podcast, talking with Ken Hite. And thank Ken for coming on, and thank Jesse for filling in tonight for Vince. And we'll catch you all next time.